What up, it's Shankster94, and welcome to my ultimate weapon showcase of Resident Evil. So let me immediately suggest you proceed straight to part 1 of the weapon showcase if you came solely to see the weapons, because this video is an especially important one for my most dedicated subscribers and followers, and I've got more to say than ever, so it's going to be its own video. Just know that the entire showcase will include commentary. So, what makes this specific video so special is that it's the commencement video to an entire saga of content creation on my channel that I've dubbed the second Remaking era. This will be an undeterminable period where I recreate every past weapon review and melee showcase that I've done in the Resident Evil game series. Basically, every single game from the series progenitor you're seeing here to the most recently released game by the time I reach it will receive a newly recorded weapon showcase as well as a melee move showcase if the game features melee. One of the key factors to this whole, if you will, reboot of my channel will be recording the most definitive versions of each game in the highest visual quality attainable by my nearly $6,000 computer tower and 4K 240Hz HDR monitor combo. Now, for one of the simplest games in the franchise like this one, most of that is overkill, and this game will only be recorded in 4K SDR at 60 frames per second. The real contributor to just how clean and polished this game's graphical quality will look is the version of the game that I'm playing, which at base level is the PC version. The upscaled textures are thanks to the Seamless HD project team and many others who have contributed to visually glowing up these classic games. I'll provide a link to their Resident Evil 1 page in the description. Speaking of the PC version, one of the top missing things from my original weapon review that I made over 12 years ago of this game was the PC exclusive weapons, which included a couple of machine guns. So in this new showcase, you can rest assured that they will be featured, but I'll still throw in the lone PlayStation version weapon, the custom Beretta, to ensure that all weapons from any version will be shown. Now, the other key factor to my second Remaking era is the amount of detail and information I will put into the showcases. My weapon review routine has evolved tremendously in the 12 years I've been doing them, with added bits of extra details such as cutscenes, weapon and part locations, and most recently, real-life weapon counterparts and OG counterparts if the game itself is a remake, and the total price of the weapon if it's purchasable. All of these informational details will be included in every game showcase during this Remaking era, along with 2 more additional details I've decided to consider. One being ammo types, where I inspect the specific ammunition in the game upon changing weapon classes, and the other being the total amount of weapons in the game. The latter piece of information will contribute to a result of the total amount of weapons in the entire game franchise that I will add up at the end of every individual showcase. Melee moves will also have their own count for the Remaking era. So now to go over my newly updated routine for showcasing weapons, refined through time to begin this new era on my channel. As always, this will be a preview of my step-by-step process of going through the weapon lineup, and I usually use clips from my past showcases to demonstrate it. For the entire Remaking era when it comes to weapons, I will use footage primarily from the classic reviews of the same games to let you compare and appreciate the sheer visual improvement. In cases where the classic review doesn't depict some of the steps because I hadn't established them yet, I'll use footage from other showcases. That being said, this emerging showcase will feature footage of the very first weapon review I've ever done. This will be the only video where I'll go into extreme detail with the process and cover every possible step for these new showcases, regardless of being applicable to any particular game. The rest of the series will only cover steps appropriate for the game. So before beginning the showcase, I will sort the weapons into categories loosely based on weapon classes and place them in a specific order roughly by firepower. If there is more than one weapon in a category, then they will be showcased in the order of obtaining them. The Resident Evil franchise is known to contain knives, melee weapons, sub-weapons both throwable and defensive, handguns or semi-automatic pistols, machine guns including automatic pistols, SMGs, and assault rifles, shotguns both pump action and semi-automatic, sniper rifles, magnum pistol and revolvers, explosive launchers, and finally miscellaneous weaponry that are often unconventional and or fictional. Some games also have weapons that can only be used in specific areas, and those I'll usually show last. To begin showcasing, my first step for each weapon will be introducing it in a designated menu typically located in a game's bonus features that has detailed models of the weapon, either static or 3-dimensional. If the game in question doesn't have such a menu, then I'll show it in the game's inventory. If the weapon happens to be the first firearm of a category, then I'll have a brand new step where I'll check out the ammunition of that weapon class. I'll try to mention ballistics information if I can, but be aware I'm personally not a weapons expert in real life, and video games can be difficult to pinpoint accurate weapon info since they're often incorrect or misleading. My next step will be inspecting the weapon in the inventory, reviewing its statistics if provided, and reading its in-game description. If the weapon has custom parts specifically designed for it, then I'll overview those as well. Afterwards, I'll incorporate a detail I introduced in the last weapon review before this remaking era began, and that's providing a photo of the weapon's real-life counterpart, if applicable. A disclaimer for all weapon showcases I do is the source of my IRL weapon information. I use the Internet Movie Firearms Database, a weapon wiki for movies, TV, and video games whose pages can be edited by virtually anyone, which brings about the possibility of inaccuracy when claiming the IRL versions of the game. Weapon enthusiasts and gun nuts watching my videos may feel pressed to call out those inaccuracies, but there's nothing reasonable I can do once the video is uploaded except mention it in the description. If the game I'm showcasing the weapons of happens to be a remake, then I'll also compare the current weapon to its OG counterpart briefly. From there, I'll divert to showing the location of the weapon, whether you start straight off with it, find it at a specific location in the game, and potential conditions required to obtain it, purchase it with in-game currency from a shopkeeper or store, unlock it as a reward by meeting certain criteria when playing or completing the game, or combinations of all of the above. Then I'll do the same for the weapon's custom parts if it has any. After all that, we'll finally see the weapon being handled by the main characters of the game. If there's any special maneuver involving the weapon, such as resting stances, re-equipping, etc., I'll try to show those. At that point, I'll proceed to test fire or use the weapon in a safe, enemy-free, well-lit area that I like to call the hub, which, by the way, I'll give a brief tour of at the start of showcasing the weapons. While test firing, I will add an optimized slow motion effect to one or more of the shots fired, with explosions getting a reverse effect on top of the slow-mo. After emptying the weapon of ammo and witnessing its unloaded state, if the game's modern enough, I'll perform the satisfying reload animation. The most recent games have two types of reloads, the full reload and the tactical reload, and I'll be sure to show both when I need to. I may make a comment or two about the reload if I find it interesting. From there, I'll announce the enemy I've chosen to test the firepower of the weapon on. When it comes to enemy testing, I'll usually try to use the same enemy for multiple weapons in a category. I'll start with the most abundantly basic enemy for the weakest weapons, then as the firepower goes up, I'll switch to more powerful enemies to equal the playing field. This will ensure that I keep enemy testing relatively brief and the shot amounts in the single digits, since the real focus of these showcases is the weapons themselves, not their damage to health point ratio. When shooting an enemy, especially in more modern games, I will try to aim for the back of the torso since it's the largest part of the body and has the least potential to be obscured by limbs or weapons. This will also deal the most average damage to allow for a formulaic range of possible shot amounts. After reviewing the results of the enemy test and comparing them to other weapons of the category, I will usually declare it concluded. However, much of the latter half of the Resident Evil games have weapon upgrades and or parts that can be permanently attached, so I must show the weapon with those considered. In which case, after the first enemy test, I'll return to the weapon hub and apply all the upgrades and parts to max out the weapon's attributes. If the game uses any type of currency in order to purchase these parts and upgrades, I will tally up the total price of the weapon including its base value. This is also one of my newest steps, beginning with my previous weapon review of Resident Evil 4 Remake. This in itself will add up to the grand total cost of all the weapons in the game. With all upgrades and parts attached, I'll repeat the steps of test firing, reloading, and enemy testing to witness its maximum potential. At this point, it'll be safe to declare the weapon truly concluded, but before moving on to the next weapon, I will share one more newly added detail, and that will be all the weapons' appearances prior to the current showcase in the Resident Evil franchise. Then if the weapon has in-game cutscenes depicting it being used or fired, I will show all of those to segue into the next weapon of the lineup, and the process starts all over again. Now, of course, one of my oldest traditions in my weapon showcases will forever continue, and that is the explosive critical Magnum headshot. Now, the rules behind this used to be it had to be the most powerful Magnum in its class or the bulkiest, and it must be done on the most basic enemy, which is usually a zombie type or a plaga type enemy. And of course, to intensify its glory, I will add an optimized slow-mo effect to it, just like I do with a regular weapon testing. Now, starting with the last weapon review I did, I will show all Magnums performing an explosive critical headshot. At the very end of these weapon showcases, I may mention other details and secrets about the weapons if the game has anything worth mentioning. These can include alternative methods to unveiling weapons, game version exclusivities that just may be out of my reach to show, just little side details that I'll treat as extras. From then, I'll announce the next game in the series lineup and close out the weapon showcase. Alrighty people, so that's going to conclude this insanely detailed prologue to the first weapon showcase of my second Remaking era, as well as the whole Remaking era itself. I deeply appreciate your patience and hope you guys are well informed and anticipating all that's to come, and I'll see you over in the first part of my ultimate remastered weapon showcase of Resident Evil.